Fred, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I am great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. I'm excited to have you on here and talk to you. We're going a little bit of a different direction than what I've gone conversation wise on this podcast before, which I love to do. And so I'm excited to dive into it. But before we do that, a little bit about you. Who are you?
I'm Fred Rutman, also known as Repeatedly Dead Fred, because that's what has happened to me over the last 12 years. I've had some medical issues, and I it took medical calamities, I guess, medical error and stuff like that, and I've been clinically dead a few dozen times. And clinically dead is, when your heart has stopped beating and you've stopped breathing for 30 seconds or more. So that can lead to a lot of damage. And every time my heart stopped, I collapsed and hit my head. So I had a ton of concussions, which are fairly prevalent in sports now. And I found some things that have helped me a lot with the healing of this. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, not awesome for you, but awesome to talk to you. I just want to go into first because I think a lot of people don't truly realize the impact that concussions can have on people. Like we all, hear about the like foggy brain or the stars or the things that can happen, but what other things, that we don't really think about are involved with the concussion symptoms?
Well, my concussions were a little different because I had a number of them in rapid succession, whereas most people only get, one, and they, depending on the severity, it affects that. So I had the compounding issues. I lost memory. I lost part of my ability to speak. I was slurring my words. I lost a lot of my balance. I lost my depth perception. I lost fine motor control. I had an entire language knocked out of my brain, which I'm still just working on recovering like 12 years later. My reading speed went down, normal brain fog, stuff like that. And most of your things that your body normally controls at the subconscious level, like, how much you sweat, like your tolerance to hot and cold and things like that, also got knocked out. My circadian rhythm got totally reversed. I used to be very much a morning person. Now I can almost never get up before 8 a.m. It's really,
That's
really
interesting.
a strange change to your life. As we were talking before, you want to get back to your normalcy after your vacation, and my normalcy is pretty much gone. So
Yeah, I never realized that was what could be impacted by concussions, but that would definitely be a change, especially if someone's a morning person or a night person, to all of a sudden have a switch of their routine.
yeah, it used to be great. You could hit the gym at 6:30 in the morning and before you go to work, and now it's like, you know can I get to the gym?
Right? Can I wake up to go to work?
Yeah. So
Well, before I know you used intermittent fasting, that was your most effective way to get over all of these symptoms, but what
mhm.
else did you try prior to finding that as your solution?
I think I used pretty much the go-to tools, which are exercise, which does your body a huge benefit besides the fitness level. It helps regenerate neurons and all sorts of things like that. And intense learning, forcing your brain to go back to work. And especially if you can get it to work in areas that were out of your comfort zone. So, if you're not a musician, if you start trying to learn to play the piano or guitar or whatever, your brain tries to activate different pathways and regenerate pathways and that sort of thing. So I did intense learning, which I continue to do. And you tend to find people that do intense learning, and they're intense readers and debaters and looking into all sorts of things, tend to lead longer and happier lives. I mean, that's very anecdotal, but that's what I see from my observation. Maybe I'm just looking for it and I see it, but I see it a lot in the community around me, where these people are living, well into their 80s and 90s, and they're vibrant and their cognitive abilities are strong. And I know lawyers that could go back to work and they're like 90 years old.
Mhm. I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I've even seen studies of, they've done autopsies on nuns who are learning throughout their entire life, and their
Mhm,
brains show signs of Alzheimer's, but they never showed any signs of dementia throughout their entire life. So I think there's definitely some truth to that learning, just to for
mhm,
that brain, the impact on the brain and happiness and health.
mhm. Unfortunately, and this is a true thing, I'm not making this up, there's a nun shortage. And because there's less
I have heard
women
that.
going into the nunnery, I guess, is that the nun calling? And they spend so much time in service of the elderly nuns. And
Mhm.
there's really, it's a shame because they do such good work in the community.
Yeah, but now that you mentioned that, I have heard that myself.
Mhm.
So how did you, before we get into the medical benefits of intermittent fasting, how did you come across that as being a possible solution and testing that out for yourself?
Just by fluke, I went to see my cardiologist in February of 2018, and I was sitting in the exam room, and he comes into the room and he literally throws a book at me. So the book was, I'll show it on the screen here, The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung.
Okay.
And he's a nephrologist from Toronto, a kidney specialist. And he started implementing it with his patients that had a lot of type 2 diabetes because they have neuropathy and they lose kidneys and limbs and, just spiral into a terrible quality of life as they get older and their diabetes gets worse. And he found tremendous success with weight loss and getting their blood sugars under control and reversing their type 2 diabetes. So he did a presentation at my hospital, or the hospital where my doctors worked, and they all bought in. So their buy-in was, for the weight loss part of it. They had no idea about the other health benefits of it. So the doctor throws the book at me and he says, buy this, read this, do this. But then he gives me the medical disclaimer. After you talk to all your other doctors and make sure we can keep your meds under control and there's no side effects and stuff like that. And so anybody that may or decide to do this in the future, please do it with your proper health professional. And if you have a history of eating disorders or you're pregnant or breastfeeding, probably not a good idea. So
Good
so
disclaimer.
it took it took about 2 months for all my doctors to get together and give me the okay to this. And I started very conservatively on a 12-12 schedule. So that means I was only fasting for 12 hours and I had a 12-hour window where I could eat. Now, most people get excited. I can eat for 12 hours? No, no, you don't eat for 12 hours straight. In that 12-hour period, you can have your 2 or 3 meals or whatever. And it worked for me. I got my blood sugars and insulin medication monitored every 2 or 4 weeks. And I started that, I guess, in May 2018. By September, my body was already letting me do a 23-1. It was that fast for me. May not be that fast for other people, but it was that fast for me. And so that was September. I started doing that. So then you switch to a protocol called OMAD, 1 meal a day. And instead of trying to have your normal 3 meals and having your 2,000 calories or whatever that is, you just eat your 1 meal and a dessert or a meal and a snack or whatever you want in that hour, and then you start your fast over again. And probably 5 months in, I noticed I had no more inflammation in my body. I used to wake up every morning and my body would just ache. So at one point I was 340 pounds. I had played a ton of hockey growing up because I'm Canadian and it's the law. You have to play hockey. I played football and college rugby. So my body was pretty beat up. And I just thought every joint in my body aching was just the result of all those impacts and carrying all that weight and everything, but it went away. And that was, 2018. And now it's mid 2022. I don't have an ache or pain in my body, like nothing. I don't get a headache. I don't get migraines, except for, COVID over the last little while, which everybody gets. I just haven't been sick. It's quite amazing.
That's awesome.
My asthma went away. My sleep apnea went away. The scars from my various surgeries are fading, which is also something I can talk about later, but it's pretty common. And, I ended up as a moderator in a fasting group run by Jen Stevens, who wrote Delay, Don't Deny and Fast, Feast, Repeat, which is New York Times bestseller. And I'm holding that up for the people who are watching on YouTube, and the people who are listening to audio. You'll just have to guess. So this is usually number 1 or number 2 on the New York Times bestseller for whatever the intermittent fasting category is. So it's both her and Jason Fung vie for the top spot. And this is what I use as my Bible, Fast, Feast, Repeat. And what makes this such a great book is it tells you how to tweak. And probably in intermittent fasting, the tweaking is the most important part for people, because we have such different bioavailabilities and different genetic systems that get activated. So learning how to tweak to get the most benefit is really important.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that part about the tweaking for your body, just because not that intermittent fasting is bad for anyone, but every body is a little bit different, and making sure to do it so it's going to benefit you and, help you in the right ways, I think is really important.
And if people are wondering, well, why would it be different for me than you? What we're learning is this all goes back to your gut biome. And, we all have trillions of bacteria in our digestive tract. And that's essentially what runs your body. And, they're sending out all sorts of different neurotransmitters throughout your body and telling your brain to do this. And if you have a craving for something, it's usually because one of those bacterial groups are sending really strong messages. And I hope I get his name right. I think he's an Israeli researcher, Dr. Iran Elanov, something like that. He says when people do the weight regain after they've done a diet per se, it's because these bacteria want to get back to past their homeostasis, and they signal your body to have these cravings and get you to binge and all sorts of things. They're crafty little buggers.
They definitely are. They definitely are. And I don't know how much the book goes into it, but I'm sure just knowing what I do about the female hormones and cycle, I'm sure you have to tweak things around that as well. Because I know hormonally, how much food we want and need and does change based on our cycles too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we see that a lot in the group that I moderated in. There was 335,000 people, and probably 98% of them were women. So cycles got talked about a lot. And, even though it's a monthly thing for most women, it's amazing how we don't recognize patterns because our bodies are so messed up from, ultra processed food. And I remember one woman saying there's, certain days of the month she just got ravenous and she couldn't understand it. And she's like, I don't want to break my fast. But, when your body tells you something so overt, and it took her a while to clue in that she was, starting her cycle. And so the brain fog lifts after you fasted for a while, and you become much more mindful or self-aware, or whatever you want to call it. But it definitely kicks in.
Yeah, it's really funny because I it wasn't until more recently that I started really tracking my food intake because of my training, but I really started noticing those patterns of those ravenous days, because all of a sudden I'm like, I've eaten a ton today.
And sometimes you have to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You just have to listen to what your body's telling you.
Yeah, if your body decides it's going to work on, muscle rebuild and stuff like that for, 3, 4, 5 days, above its normal rates, you're going to need more input.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's dive into some of the medical things that do happen, because we all know with intermittent fasting, the weight loss benefits and that sort of thing. But talking about more of the medical side of things, what's happening internally into the body for the healing and recovery processes that happen?
Okay. The first thing that happens when you intermittent fast is your insulin levels, your basal insulin levels decrease. And that's if your basal insulin levels are too high, that's when you get into metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes and things like that. It's a self-perpetuating system where your body becomes addicted to insulin, basically, and it keeps trying to get you to produce more and more, and it throws all your other hormones out of whack for the most part. A big generalization, but that's the general understanding. So it allows you to sort of drain the pool of insulin and get it back to normal levels. So once you get it back to normal levels, the other hormones seem to have a domino effect, and depending on the person, certain hormones will normalize quicker than others. But the leptin and ghrelin, which govern your hunger and satiety signals, get back to normal. So we call that appetite correction. If you're fasting for a longer period of time, like maybe over 18 hours, your growth hormone kicks in. And we've seen growth hormone kick in for some people to near teenage levels when you're going through those growth spurts. And why this is super important for women especially is because of osteoporosis. Growth hormone is your driver of bone density, and it's super, super helpful for you to avoid getting those weakened bones. And of course, growth hormone helps you grow and maintain your muscle, so you don't have what's called is sarcopenia. Is that when your muscle dies off over time, something like that?
Yeah, I'm some of these medical terms, even though I'm PT, I'm bad at and
Yeah.
forget.
Mhm.
I call it atrophy, but
Yeah,
it's a sarcopenia as well.
yeah. So it's it won't eliminate it because there's no way to eliminate it for sure. But adding that extra growth hormone and having your body recognize it needs to produce more of it is huge. And it helps the muscles repair faster and all the other things that growth hormone does. It helps moderate your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, and adrenaline and all sorts of other things. So that, there's dozens of hormones way beyond anything I can talk about, but it's all these things get activated.
Okay.
And you just start feeling a lot better.
Definitely. As you're talking, it made me think, I know you mentioned pregnancy, breastfeeding. Are there any other populations or people that like this just is not safe for people to do?
The general guidance is that if you've had an eating disorder, however you define that, you really either shouldn't do it or only do it under strict medical supervision. Because a lot of people will tend to get caught up in the chase, and they start thinking, well, if I can fast for 20 hours, 25 hours should be better. And that may not be better for you, or 30 hours or 60 hours or whatever. So, and I'm not an expert in eating disorders, but that's part of the problem is we don't recognize the signals, and we can go overboard and not read our body signals properly, and then you get into trouble.
I can see how that'd be a problem, definitely. You mentioned in passing earlier the scar tissue decreasing. I would love for you to talk about how that's happening.
Our our body has a process called autophagy, or depending if you're from out of the US, autophagy. And it's a system that's working 24/7 in everybody. And what it does is it hunts down folded proteins. Enfolded proteins are proteins that didn't get put to work properly in the body to do whatever they were supposed to do. And they end up in your cells, all these torn up bits of protein chains, and they start to clog up your cells. And we can't feel anything that's going on in the cellular level, so we don't even know this is happening. So the autophagy process goes to clean these things out. And so it's like pouring Drano down your pipes or whatever. But when it clogs up your cells, it literally clogs up your cells, and it impairs your cell's ability to make energy. So going through the ATP cycle through my grade 11 biology memory
Right.
and stuff like that. So everything gets messed up at the cellular level. So the more it can get rid of those proteins, the better it is for your body. And the longer you fast, the more ramped up the autophagy goes. We know it seems to get to its top speed around 42, 44 hours, depending on the person. So there's more benefit. So it's like going from, driving in the school zone at 10 miles per hour to, getting onto the highway at 70 or 80 miles per hour. That's the difference in effect. So, and your scars are mostly collagen protein.
Mhm.
So, scars I had in my head, scars I've had for surgery. People lose their skin tags. Women have told us their cesarean scars and their varicose veins are disappearing. So it's pretty legit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
The other thing I have written down that I wanted to go over, and you've kind of mentioned as far as the microbiome and how that improves. How, I know obviously eating a processed diet is not good for your microbiome, that we want to eat whole foods, but how does intermittent fasting improve that even more than just eating real food?
That's a great question. When your gut biome gets knocked out of kilter, so you've got more bad bacteria, it's almost like a tribal experience in your digestive tract. So, you've got all these tribes of bacteria that are fighting for dominance, and you want the large majority to be the good bacteria. But when you eat ultra processed food, they love sugar, these bad bacteria, and that's their weapon of mass destruction. And that's what throws it out of balance. And then you get leaky gut. And that's when the very thin line in your digestive tract that tries to keep these bad bacteria out of your system lets them in. And, your body becomes toxic, for lack of a better term. And your immune system gets out of whack, and it doesn't protect what it should protect. And everything just goes off kilter. So when you intermittent fast for a while, you'll find a couple of things happen. I mentioned the appetite correction, but you'll also find foods will taste different because your cells get freed up to do what they're actually supposed to do. So, for example, do you have Twizzlers licorice or something like that?
Yeah. Yep, we have those.
So, used to love Twizzlers. Now I can't stand the taste of them. So your body starts to rejecting the ultra processed foods, and you're still responsible for what you eat and everything like that, but it makes it much easier to be responsible because your tastes change and your amount of food that you want to eat changes. So it's a really, really powerful combo. There's a lot of foods that I will eat now because they taste appealing, especially fruits and vegetables that I wouldn't have eaten, 5 years ago. And there's things that, I don't consider window worthy anymore.
I like it. I like it. I know you mentioned in our previous conversation as well that intermittent fasting also activates epigenetics.
Yes. So my understanding of epigenetics is we have our primary genes that we see expressed. So, your hair color, your eye color, your frame, how tall you are and stuff like that. But your body has these subsystems in the gene pool. that activate things like autophagy and all sorts of other similar processes in your body that we're just starting to find out about. And one of those things is heat shock proteins. So that's an epigenetic system. Are you familiar with these?
I'm not those by name. I mean, epigenetics, I know kind of in a very general sense, but not the heat shock proteins.
So
No.
the heat shock proteins are a subsystem gets activated factor. So Dr. Rhonda Patrick is a huge proponent of saunas and regular sauna. And the research she's found and read about is says regular sauna use will reduce your comorbidity factors by like 60%. And that's across the board. That's like Alzheimer's and the plaque that builds up, dementia, cardiac, everything. And that's because sitting in the sauna activates these heat shock proteins, which act as a moderate workout for most people. So if you're sitting in the sauna after you've adapted to it, again, warning, don't go into the hottest sauna you can find for an hour. When your body acclimates it, it's like doing a moderately hard workout without doing anything except sitting there and sweating. So, and it really doesn't matter which type of sauna you use, you know, whether it's infrared or steam or, you know, the regular dry sauna, they all have a considerably good effect on your body.
Okay. That's really interesting.
Mhm.
You
She's great.
You broke
You
up
should.
just a little bit in there.
Okay.
Right before you started about her and the sauna research. So what specifically are the heat shock proteins? What do they do for the body?
They essentially mimic a moderately hard workout without you doing anything.
Okay.
So you get the benefit of exercise without actually having to do the exercise. So for a lot of people, you know, you don't have the strain on your joints or the impact injuries or things like that. So the heat shock proteins just activate cleaning out your arteries and veins and protect you against all the things, all the morbidities. So Alzheimer's, dementia, cardiac, everything like that, diabetes, MS. It just helps you push those aside to a great deal.
Okay.
It's really, really powerful tool to add. You know, nobody's suggesting don't do any exercise because that puts a different type of stress on your body. But
Yeah.
the sauna plus the exercise plus eating well, you know, it's a really potent defense system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've never been a huge fan of saunas, but I may have to start utilizing them.
Well, Rhonda's got a really, really good podcast. I think it's called Found My Fitness.
Okay.
So, you know, she's an actual researcher. So, you know, PhD, blah, 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 brainiac, annoying person.
Smarter than me.
She has really, really interesting guests on.
Okay. I'll check that out. Thank you. Well, is there anything else, kind of start closing it out? Anything else we haven't mentioned today about intermittent fasting that you think would be important to bring up?
Well, you do get some weight loss, and that happens for different people and different rates. Your body, as a big generalization, tends to prioritize healing itself before it gets to the weight loss part of things. So if you have a very beat up body like I did, it might take you longer to see any results on the weight loss side.
Okay.
But you know, the body goes into ketosis when you fast, which is your brain seems to prefer fueling itself off ketones as opposed to carbohydrates. And that's the part that gets rid of the brain fog and all those other issues. But your energy stores last for so long. Like you never bonk when you're fasting once you've adapted to it. And I know many people in the group that, you know, regularly do triathlons and marathons in the fasted state. So I'm no super athlete like that. Peter Attia talks about doing his endurance swims and triathletes um, and in the fasted state. But I know I've done 90-minute bike rides in the Toronto heat and humidity and gone like 60, 90 minutes fairly easily.
Okay. Very cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. Well, if anyone has more questions for you about how this all works, or maybe wants to join into some of the groups that you've talked about, where can they find you or more information?
They can find me on my Instagram, which is repeatedly dead Fred, or repeatedly.dead.fred@gmail, and happy to connect with anybody. And if they want to go right to the master, Jen Stevens, they can go to jenstevens.com and connect with her on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was really informative, and I think a lot of people will get some good benefits out of it.
I hope so. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.